Well, hello again. This is Mike Siver with the Mike Siver Show with my guest, Carrie Sluter. And today we're going to talk about listening. This is a big pet peeve of Carrie's. So we're going to talk about raising children and teaching them how to listen, or giving them perspective and some perception of how important it is to actually listen to what people say. It says here, the skill of listening and not judging seems to be a dying skill. Many are confused about the difference between getting information, having an opinion, making a judgment. An opinion is made by those who ask questions, listen, and see for themselves with an open mind. Judgment is made by those who never ask or see, but only hear what they want to hear because it suits their already preconceived opinion.
How true it is.
What do you want to say about that, Carrie?
Well, it's very true. It's very common. We tend to be listening to someone or talking to someone in the communication. We forget to listen to understand instead of listening with a purpose of forming our opinion or already having formed our opinion, which is something I deal a lot with some different ones that I work with all the time. It's a skill to listen to understand. If you can't, I used to teach this in my Bible classes, that if you're not listening to understand, you cannot repeat what somebody said. You should be able to tell someone, if you're really listening to understand, Mike, you should be able to tell them exactly what they said, why they said it, why they feel that way, and explain from their perspective why they feel the way they do, or why they said what they said. But then to speak, to be understood, to be able to say, but I understand you feel this way, but here's how I see it. That's when it becomes communication between two people instead of just a talk at somebody.
Right.
Because it's easy to talk at someone and not have that, I want to communicate with you because I want an understanding between us. I don't want to go into an argument. This is how a lot of arguments start.
Yeah.
Is people have already formed an opinion and then it becomes an argument because you're not hearing what I'm saying. That's not at all what I was trying to get to. Or someone cuts you off before you even finish with their opinion coming back out. So,
Well, we deal a lot with that with the counseling.
I'm sure.
And that somebody will be saying something, or I'll be saying something to a person, or to you, or to whatever. And before I'm finished, as you just said, they're coming back with something.
Yeah.
And what I try to explain to them, and we got to get this over with first before we can keep going in our conversation, is when you stop listening to me, you're starting to think of a response before you talk.
Right.
While you're thinking of a response, you're not listening. Because you're not hearing, you're forming an opinion. You switched off. You heard enough, or you thought was enough, of what I was saying, and you didn't take the time to listen to my whole comment or conversation, because I may have diffused what I initially talked about, or I may have contradicted what I initially talked about.
Right.
So your comment would have been irrelevant, but you don't listen to that. So now you're thinking about a response while I'm still talking, which means you're not listening to me.
Right.
Or you're not listening to your mom or your dad, whoever it is. And we talk about that a lot. And the other part about listening is, if you're a mother or dad and you're giving instructions to your children to do something, whatever it might be, and they don't listen to it all, they're not going to do it all.
Right.
And that's why I work with a lot of parents on this reward and no reward system rather than reward and punishment. If you tell a child, or they have a job to do or a chore to do, and they're going to get money for it, or something they want, something positive for doing it, that doesn't all have to be money.
Right.
If they don't complete it, then they don't get it. But they won't listen to, they will in the end, but in the beginning, they don't listen to the whole conversation. You might tell them, go into your room, make your bed, Pick your clothes off, to put them in the dresser, fold them before you put them in the dresser, put your shoes under the bed and come back. They're gonna go in, make the bed and come back and expect the money. And you'll say, no, you didn't listen to what I was saying. You have to fold your clothes and put them in the dresser, put your shoes under the bed, then you'll get the money. And then all of a sudden, it take 2 or 3 times, they'll start to listen. They'll start to hear all of the instructions, because by not doing it all, they don't get the positive consequences. So we're finding that's working very well with families with young children, is to do the reward and no reward, and try to get rid of the word punishment. Get that out of the vocabulary as much as you can, and also change that word punishment to consequences. This is the consequences for your action. There's good consequences and there's bad consequences. Good consequences are a result of an action. That's all they are. Result of a thought, result of an action. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, you don't get the reward. That's the consequences. If you do what you're supposed to do, you get the reward. That's the consequences. You run a cleaning business, and your consequences are you get money at the end of the job, theoretically.
Yeah.
And that's your consequence. If you don't do the job right, you don't get paid. Or you get some of the money, not all the money, or whatever, whatever your contract is agreeable to. So listening is such an important skill that I don't think we teach enough. We expect it, but we don't teach it. We don't have a skill to, like I said, explain the whole job to them, and then there's consequences, positive consequences if they do it all. There's no consequences. There's nothing if they don't do it all. So I don't know where you want to go with that one or not, or if you think that's something that will work.
Well, with raising several children from different areas in life, from different raisings, and trying to teach all of them, when you tell them what to do, you give them an assignment or ask them to do something and they don't listen. Well, it becomes the something that we have to learn how to do, is to learn how to communicate better. When you're dealing with a spouse, I think a lot of people probably in the audience are having a hard time with their spouse, or trying to communicate and listening. They're not listening. They don't hear me. It's real easy as a spouse, Mike, as you well know, to not hear when there's that little comment made that could make your whole world happier.
Yep.
That you just didn't hear it. I've been telling you forever that, you don't ever get me you don't ever buy me flowers. Well, I did last year, and the next day they don't show up with flowers or do something, they didn't listen, because it's obviously on your heart. So, and when it comes to raising children, what I have learned and what I've used in this is, did you hear me? I stop. When I see that look on their face of bewilderment, or that they are thinking their own thoughts.
Right.
They're not following. If their eyes aren't connected with me, or they're not really paying attention, or if I'm telling them something and they've already have their opinion coming out of their mouth, yeah, but I said, that's not what happened. They're not listening. They can't be, because you cannot be listening and speaking and thinking at the same time.
No.
It's not available. You can only have one thought at every moment. At any given moment, Mike, you can only have one thought. It's a proven fact. You can't have 2 separate thoughts at the same split second. So training ourselves as the peers, or the person who wants to get through to, whether it's a child or a spouse or a teenager or just a business person, is to really make sure that a person is listening, and ask them, did you understand what I said? And I do that with the kids. Quite often I'll say, did you understand what I said? Yes. Well, then tell me exactly what I said. Now, why do I want you to do that? Then you're making sure that they heard you, they understood, but the other thing that we are doing is we're teaching them the skill of listening to understand and speaking to be understood for future for them. Because that's what they're going to grow up to be accustomed to, is listening and hearing and repeating Because if a person can't tell you what you said, then they really weren't listening.
No. And you said, the second part of that is the speaking to be understood.
Right.
That's a skill as well.
That is, and it's far lost. Sometimes in society, there's so much just throwing something out there instead of saying, wait a minute, you're not listening to me. This is what I am trying to say.
Yeah.
And saying things crystal clear. We have a lot of filler words.
Yeah.
Yeah, These filler words, instead of staying really focused on getting the point out there and making it full circle, and then stop and let them speak back in return to answer.
Yep.
It just becomes two conversations going, and neither one of them are really getting anywhere.
Well, when I was in one of my graduate classes on communication, we had to write a paragraph of something we wanted to talk about.
Uh-huh.
And my professors have always said that I write the way I talk, which is too many words.
Yeah.
But we took the paragraph, every student took the paragraph, and then we took out the words that weren't necessary
Right.
for the meaning of the sentence or the meaning of the paragraph.
Right.
Most of the time, my paragraphs got down to about one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And all the other words were totally superfluous.
Right.
They didn't have any sense being in the sentence. They didn't support the sentence.
Right.
They were just my way of sounding important, I guess, or throwing words out there that weren't necessary to be used. Mm-hmm. And that was a big lesson for me on writing to be heard, writing to be understood, without throwing the ands and the buts and the ors and the ises and everything in there that aren't necessary.
Well, and sometimes you can just keep going and going and going.
Yeah.
The old saying of keep it simple, salesperson.
Yeah.
KISS. Keep it simple, and we don't even do that in everyday language. To keep it specific, what is it that we are trying to say right now? What is the message we're trying to get out there? It's easy to get so far out of bounds. Something that I learned to take us back to the Bible, which that's me.
Right.
If in the Bible, the book of Proverbs is full of short, sweet, and to the point. You ever want to really know what the Bible says in the instructions of God? It's real simple. Take anything out of Proverbs. They're short, sweet, simple,
Right to the point.
And right to the point. In a study that I did many years ago, I found a word that's the word sententious. Have you ever heard the word sententious?
No.
Okay, and I've used that in a few situations in life. That it's a sententious statement. The book of Proverbs is full of them, and it means saying much in few words. So, saying much in few words. How quick can you say something? Sometimes you can see a bulletin board that's got 4 words on it, and it says a million things.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to try to focus on, saying more in less words.
Well, the other thing that comes to my mind about communication and listening, which is what this show is all about, is so many people, especially couples and kids living in the same house, will communicate through walls, through rooms, through hallways, from the kitchen to the living room.
Right.
And they're talking to you or giving instructions or asking a question, not even knowing what you're doing. You could be on the computer, you could be reading, you could have the headphones on, you could be
your
on
phone talking.
They don't know what you're doing, and yet they're giving you instructions and having a conversation with you.
Happens all the time in my house.
Oh, that's one of my pet peeves.
Right, mine too. They'll come in the door, start talking to me, and I'm sitting there on an important phone call, and they're going, "But do you think this is like?" Stop.
So what
Pay attention.
I ended up doing was not responding until they come to where I can see them.
No, one of my best things, and I do this probably more often than anybody. Just a minute. Just a minute. Can't you see I'm on the phone?
Well,
doing something.
I work very hard on getting them or my children or my wife to come and look at me in the face. If you want to talk to me, then
Get
you
my
address
attention.
me
Right.
and look at me. I'll look at you, and then we'll communicate. I was explaining I used to live overseas a lot, lived in Asia, in the Middle East, and over there it's very common, especially the women do it all the time, but for men to do it, and it makes American men or Western men feel a little uncomfortable that if one of them wants to talk to me personally, it doesn't have to be a personal matter, but to me directly, they'll come and hold my hand and put their hand on my elbow.
Mm-hmm.
And that means they want to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
Their words are going straight to me, and they'll look me in the face, and I'll look them in the
Right.
face. And it took me a long time to get used to that, holding one hand and putting my hand on their elbow, because that's their custom.
Right.
And unless they're in a group, talking to a group, if they're talking to you, they want you to know exactly what they're saying.
Yep.
And they want your full attention. They'll touch you. That was hard for me.
I actually had with my daughter, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because I did. I used to do that with my daughter, Ashley. She's 24 this week, bless her heart. She's going to be 24. But when she was little, if she wanted to talk to me, that's what I had her do. She would have to come up and lay her hand on me. And if I was talking and in a conversation, that is, or busy doing something, she would have to stand real quiet. And she didn't mind that at all, because she knew that the moment I got a break where I could stop, and if it was immediate, if it wasn't something real important, I would, what do you need, sweetie? And she had my full, that was kind of like a respect that you've waited your turn, you have my full attention. Because it's easy to give a half of attention if your attention is broken.
Right.
You know, you can't have two thoughts. If you're trying to still do something, yep, I hear you, you know, we need to stop and address that. And we're teaching that trait to them too, that it's okay to still be, you know, clicking an iPad or playing a game. I have, you know, the kids try to do that all the time. They're still pushing them buttons. How can you be hearing me if you're still doing that?
Yeah. And it's a skill that we have to continue and work on and work on and work on. And especially with the language today. Some of it's so abbreviated.
Ooh, yeah.
And so I don't even understand half of it when I start getting texts back from people. I don't know, half of it, it's all short and abbreviated. And it's like twittering, you get down to 140 words. If you can't say what you need to say in 140 words, you're just not going to go on. So you have to cut it back to 140 words. I like that because it's taught me to say what I mean and mean what I say in the shortest possible sentence. And whoever invented that, thank you very much, because I appreciate that. But part of what my book goes on to say is our skill in listening is learned when we are very young. If our parents listen to us, ask us questions, and listen to us when we talk, this teaches us to ask questions and listen before forming our opinion. And part of what I work on with young people and young adults is the difference between an opinion and a judgment in listening. And usually takes a little time to get that, and they understand that their judgments are made without information or without accurate information. Opinions are made with information. So if you're given information, you're seeking information that allows you to make an educated opinion.
Right.
I don't think are any educated judgments. I think they're just judgments without education, without asking questions. And we make that usually through rumors or overhearing conversations that weren't intended for you in the first place. Then you make a judgment about they like me, they don't like me, they want me to do this, they want me to do that. Or we like that person or we don't like that person. And it's a judgment without education. And that's a tough one, to get kids to understand the difference between finding out about somebody or something they heard to make an opinion or just to make a judgment. And part of what I teach in some of the classes that we run are everything you do has your name on it. No matter what it is, if you do it, it's got your name on it. And people know me and people know you that we don't even know, just because of our name. Somebody will be talking about something, they'll say, oh, well, Mike Siver did this, and their judgment's already made. They know about Mike Siver. They know all about, I've never met him, but they know all about me, whether I'm good or bad, whether I'm nice or not. They know all about me. The same with you, same with Carrie. people know you who you've never met.
Right?
And you get your reputation by your work, by your ethics, your integrity. That's what we have to go with as counselors and church people. That's the only thing that holds us above the people who judge us, is our integrity, our honesty, and our work ethics. That is our name out there before we get there. And if you don't understand that, your life can be really hard until you do. And that's also part of communication. Is, yes, you can go talk to him because he will listen. Or you can go talk to her because she will listen. Or don't waste your time talking to her, she doesn't care. You know, they may not even know you. But the opinion of you and the judgment of you has already been made. That's a tough one to teach young people. And that's where we work really hard on, the listening part. And with listening comes, like you said, questions. Ask questions. Teach young people to ask questions by asking them questions. Why did you do that? What did I say? I just explained I wanted you to do something. What did I say? Tell me what I said.
Yeah. It's surprising how often they come back with something that wasn't even in the list.
It was
You know,
off the wall.
Yeah, somewhat close, but, you know, they had one word of what you said. Because selective hearing, we talked about that.
Yeah, we've talked
Selective hearing.
A lot of people have selective hearing.
Say, we're gonna have ice cream for dinner. They'll hear that ice cream.
Oh.
We're gonna have roast beef and, oh, I don't want that.
Those are trigger words that,
Yeah.
Anything good and sweet and positive are all trigger words. They don't miss those for any of the
Right,
cookies.
exactly.
You know,
Oh,
movies.
yeah, they hone in on the treats, yeah.
Yeah, they hone in on all the positive
Yeah,
trigger
but pick
words.
up your shoes and clean up your room. Oh, no. Oh, I didn't hear you say that, Mom.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you.
And then if you ask them to repeat before you let them go do it, now there's no option. They've done it.
Right.
They've heard you.
I
They've
know
repeated
you know
you.
what I
Yeah.
told you to do.
Yeah. Many people today are very quick to make a judgment about something or someone with talking to that person instead of by asking questions and listening to what was said. Those who do not have good listening skills many times find themselves in situations that they act or make decisions without all the information. And that's how people get hurt, people get lost, things happen, feelings get hurt, you know, rumors get started because people don't ask questions and they don't understand what's involved. If they did, they would be more empathy and more sympathy to what's going on around them. And when you make judgments, you don't have any of that. Because judgment doesn't allow you to be sympathetic. Opinions do. Judgments don't. And that's a tough one also to get younger people to understand. This can make their jobs very hard when others stop really talking to them because they have shown they don't listen anyway. We talked about that before. I need to go talk to somebody about this. Well, if you're going to go talk to some people about that problem, when you go into the office, only go see Carrie because she listens. Don't talk to Mike because he doesn't listen anyway. He's got nothing important to say and he doesn't listen to start with. That travels ahead of you. You know, we travel in circles of people, whether we like to admit it or not. And all these people have got opinions because they know us. They've listened to us over a period of time. They understand where we're coming from. A lot of it's family. So they know the good and the bad and the ugly about everything. But they're not making judgments. They don't have judgments. They have opinions. And if you can get them to listen and get other people to listen and be honest, then the judgments stop being made and educated opinions are made instead, which is very, very important.
Well, have you ever worked with someone who it's really hard to talk to or to communicate with? It's hard to listen to someone who rambles a lot or just keeps going on and on. I mean, I dealt with some people and that don't really get to the point, and everything is woe is me, it's all everybody else's fault. It- that's another one that has to do with the listening and speaking to be understood and listening to understand. If you're trying to talk to someone who is not listening because they're in their own frame of mind, they've blocked out, they don't want to hear the truth.
Well,
That's another form of not listening if a person doesn't want to hear the truth. This usually happens more with adults in communications.
where I've found that is the case, and with younger, older teens, is that there's something that they don't want known. There's something that they've done or some consequences they're going to get. So you ask them a question, they talk around it. They'll talk their heads off because if they allow you to talk, you're going to bring them back on track. And they don't want to be on track. They want to be off track and change the subject. And I get a lot of that in my counseling. Well, I do some domestic violence and substance abuse and anger management.
So I was going to say,
Well, they don't want to talk about their issue because it's always somebody else's fault. So
Right.
they talk around it, they'll talk over it, they'll talk under it, but they won't talk about it. And that's one of my jobs, to get them to talk about it. So we keep coming back on track until they realize that they're not going to get us off track. But a lot of people do that, and people who they're talking to don't realize that they're just diverting the conversation. And they don't have any excuse or reason for what they've done or said, but they don't want you to figure that out either. They have good listening skills because they're listening for you to get off track. And if you, you know.
oh yeah, let's run this way.
Well, if you start
I'll
talking
jump on that
about,
one.
if I'm trying to talk to you about a behavior that you've done, and you're talking about roller skating on Saturday night, and you keep bringing that up and all the stuff that's going on, and I start talking about roller skating, well, you've got me. I've listened to you. You're listening now. You know you've got me off topic, so now we're okay.
Right.
If I bring you back on topic,
Slick way of changing the subject, right?
yep, quick way of
avoiding a subject.
yep. Having good listening and communication skills will make our personal life and working environment so much more pleasant and easier. Because people don't get frustration. People don't, their expectations are, if we're talking and I ask you to go call that cable up over there, my expectations are you heard me and you're going to go do it. And if you don't, I can get frustrated. And frustration comes before anger. So if we don't get our expectations met, we become frustrated, and if frustration isn't resolved, it becomes anger. The expectations come with communications. Is my communication to you and my expectations for you too high? Have I trained you enough? Have you been trained enough to do the job? Have I explained myself properly enough?
Right, which kind of takes us back to with children, that triggered something with me, in simple instructions that we give on a daily basis with our children, like such as take out the garbage.
Yep.
It's your turn to take out the garbage. Have they been fully instructed? Or did I say, pull the lining, pull the garbage, take it outside, put in a new liner? Or do you come by a few minutes later and say, they pulled the garbage, but they didn't put in the liner?
Right.
Are our instructions crystal clear so that we have the expectation that we're going to get the result that we're looking for? And do they understand the result we're looking for? These type of things can actually make our lives smoother and calmer if we are, if we are more in tune to that.
Yep. Well, we're done for the night. Thank you very much for that, Carrie, and we'll see if we're going to carry on with this conversation a little bit later on.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.